All right, so for the EIL presentation, my group was assigned with chapters 3 and 4 from the Shankman reading. So we're going to be talking about emotional self-perception and emotional self-control.
All right. So there was a college student named Alex who had just been elected as leader of a group project. Excited to prove himself, Alex immediately started assigning tasks without asking for input. When teammates suggested different approaches, he dismissed their ideas, convinced that his way was the best. As the project progresses, he grew frustrated, and team members felt unheard, and tensions rised very fast. When a teammate finally called Alex out, he was very defensive about it and unaware that his attitude has been shutting people down. This story highlights two key aspects of emotional intelligence leadership: self-awareness and self-control. Leaders who lack self-awareness do not recognize how their actions affect others, while those without self-control struggle to manage their reactions. Developing these skills is essential for effective leadership and teamwork. Strong leaders understand their strengths, weaknesses, and emotions while also regulating their reactions to maintain trust, collaboration. Without self-awareness and self-control, leaders can create tension, lower motivation, and harm team dynamics, which are very, very important in a workplace. First, we'll discuss self-awareness and why it's essential for leadership. Then we'll explore emotional intelligence, self-perception, and its impact on decision-making. We'll include an interactive activity to bring these concepts to life, and with a wrap-up discussion, questions for reflection.
Alrighty, so that takes us on to the first chapter, which was chapter 3, over the emotional self-perception. So I want to begin talking about, this leadership skill because it often gets overlooked, but it's absolutely foundational to emotional intelligence. At its core, emotional self-perception is about being able to identify, name, and understand your emotions, not just after the fact, but in real time as they are happening. Emotionally intelligent leaders are aware of how situations shape their emotions and how their emotions impact the people around them. So why does this matter, you might ask? Well, understanding your emotions is what allows you to lead with clarity, communicate effectively, and make better decisions. Without this skill, leaders risk making impulsive choices, misreading situations, and even creating dysfunction within their team. So, of course, self-awareness isn't always easy. Constantly tuning into your emotions and analyzing how they affect your behavior can be mentally exhausting, but it's absolutely essential for effective leadership. So let's take a quick look at the science behind our emotions. There are 6 fundamental human emotions: anger, surprise, happiness, fear, sadness, and disgust. While some emotions like happiness may feel easy to manage, others like anger and fear can be much harder to control. These emotions have biological roots, meaning that even when we try to suppress them, they still influence our decisions and interactions. That's why emotional self-perception is so important. It helps us recognize when emotions are taking over and gives us a chance to respond more effectively. Now, let's just bring this idea to life with an example. So let's meet Jose here. He's a student leader who started feeling frustrated with his team for not completing their assigned tasks. Instead of addressing the issue directly, he decided to take over the work himself. Over time, this led to burnout, resentment, and disengagement. So what was missing here? Emotional self-perception. Jose didn't take a step back to analyze his emotions or consider how they were affecting his leadership approach. If he had recognized his frustration in the moment, he could have taken a self-aware approach, perhaps initiating a conversation with his team or setting clear expectations or asking for support instead of absorbing all the work himself. So what should the takeaway here be? Your emotions shape your leadership, whether you realize it or not. Being able to identify and understand them as they happen gives you the power to lead with confidence, clarity, and emotional intelligence.
So, how do these topics relate to what we've been learning in the class so far? So, self awareness leads to stronger teams being built. So, leaders who can understand their own strengths, weaknesses, and emotions will be much better at communicating to their team. So, that means a leader who has good emotional self awareness can be more effective at delegating tasks and communicating the problems that need to be solved. Additionally, a leader who is emotionally stable will result in a much more positive team environment. Additionally, in order to be an effective leader, you need to understand your impact on other people. This includes being aware of how your own emotions are influencing your actions, which can affect team members' trust in you. If a leader is having their own opinion altered by their emotions too often, it can shut down any collaboration and trust building in a team, as people will be afraid to speak up in fear of provoking you. In order to be a good active listener, you also need to be able to open up to listening to someone telling you something that you might not love to hear. But to be a good listener, you can't interrupt someone with an outburst of emotions, as that will just spiral into an argument and be unproductive. A leader who can listen and keep a lid on their emotions will be much better at ensuring that all team member voices are heard and taken into account. And finally, a leader needs to be composed under pressure. If a team leader is crumbling, it does not inspire confidence in the team members. Being able to manage your emotions well can help prevent any problems with stress getting to a leader.
All right, so now I want to talk about something that separates great leaders from those who struggle under pressure. That's going to be emotional self-control, coming from chapter 4 here. So at its core, emotional self-control is about responding thoughtfully rather than reacting impulsively. It means recognizing your emotions, regulating them, and making intentional choices rather than letting emotions dictate your actions. Why does this matter? Well, for leaders, it's everything. A leader who can regulate their emotions stays composed under stress, maintains professionalism, and earns the trust of their team. Without it, they risk escalating conflicts, making rash decisions, and even damaging relationships. Of course, emotional self control isn't always easy. In the heat of the moment, emotions can be intense and hard to manage, but that's exactly why mastering this skill is so valuable. So, what's happening in our brains when we try to regulate our emotions? Well, the amygdala, which is our brain's emotional support or response center, is constantly scanning for threats, whether it's stress, frustration, or unexpected conflict. When triggered, it pushes us to react instinctively. But emotional self control means engaging the rational part of our brain, which is the prefrontal cortex, to step back, evaluate the situation, and choose a more measured response. And the good news, this can still be developed and strengthened, even at 20 something years of life. Strategies like mindfulness, cognitive reframing, and even simple breathing techniques can help us slow down and respond more effectively in difficult situations. Let's look at an example here. Imagine a leader who is under intense stress, whether from deadlines, personal challenges, team conflicts, whatever it may be. Now let's picture a moment where someone on their team makes an offhand remark about hating a type of music that their leader loves, something totally not important. Without emotional self-control, the leader can snap, responding with frustration or anger, maybe even shutting down the conversation entirely. This reaction, while understandable and very human of them, damages trust and escalates unnecessary tension. Now let's compare this to a leader who has mastered emotional self-control. They recognize that their stress level is high. They pause for a moment, remind themselves that this comment about the music taste or whatever it may be isn't personal, it's just an opinion. Instead of reacting emotionally, they choose to respond with humor or neutrality, keeping the conversation light and professional. That's the power of emotional self control. It's not about suppressing emotions, but about managing them in a way that benefits both you and those around you. And as leaders, that's one of the most valuable skills we can develop.
Now, looking at how the topics covered in Chapter 4 relate to what we've been learning in collaborative leadership, one of the most important topics covered in Chapter 4 is navigating stress. So, it's really important to be able to know the environment that you're in as a leader. You need to be able to recognize what stressors are going to be possible factors in that environment. Examples of this is knowing when a new project usually appears on the schedule or when things are due to be presented to bosses, as this will help prevent any surprise stressors from appearing that could lead to a very poor mental state and overall working environment in the team. Additionally, a leader needs to be able to regulate their responses. A leader cannot be exploding at a team member because they said something that hit a hot button issue. This will result in zero trust in a team and lead to a hostile work environment. By regulating your responses, you can instead build an environment where people feel comfortable talking to you, fostering cooperation within a team. And finally, a leader needs to be able to control their emotions well to be a collaborative leader. A leader needs to be able to be the one in charge of their emotions and not the other way around. This goes hand in hand with being able to self reflect, which is a required trait of a leader. If you know, for example, if you self reflect and you can understand your own biases, but you cannot stop yourself from being emotionally, responding emotionally when confronted with those biases, you are not going to be able to be the most effective leader possible.
All right, now for our interactive activity, self-reflection intended to make participants think about how they have handled their own emotions in the past to reflect on for the future. Participants should take a few minutes to write down a recent emotional reaction that they had, including what emotions they felt, as well as what they triggered that reaction. More than one situation can be written about. For example, me, I have been feeling very stressed recently because of all the work I've been doing. Ask participants to reflect on how they could have responded differently utilizing better emotional control. Have participants, if they are comfortable with the idea, discuss with a partner or a group on how they can improve their own emotional control. Personal reflections and discussion. Our reflection questions are, do you think emotional self-perception is more important than emotional self-control? Why or why not? Describe a situation where you gained a better understanding of your emotions. How did this awareness influence your behavior or perception towards the situation? How can emotional self-control improve leadership in high-stress environments? Take a second to identify what personal stressors that you are experiencing currently. These include any situational, counter, anticipatory, or time stressors. What could be done to help alleviate some of these stressors? And finally, what are a few possible hot buttons issues that you should ensure that you manage carefully?
And then just to get you guys thinking about how little this can be, I thought of an example. I close a lot at work. It's at a restaurant, and that often with my closing duties puts me in charge of my coworkers. So I have a little example here for you. One night at work while closing, I was responsible for ensuring that everyone completed their side work properly, and a coworker asked me to sign off on the women's bathroom, claiming it had been done. However, upon checking, I found it in very poor condition, which initially made me very frustrated emotionally. But instead of reacting emotionally, I took a deep breath and engaged in what we call now emotional self-perception. By recognizing my frustration and acknowledging how my reaction could impact my coworker and the overall team dynamic. Rather than expressing my initial thoughts, I applied some emotional self control by setting aside my frustration and approaching the situation with a more problem solving mindset. I calmly listed the specific tasks that still needed to be completed, ensuring my feedback was clear and constructive rather than confrontational. This experience reinforced the importance of self awareness and leadership for me, as understanding my emotions allowed me to manage them effectively, communicate more professionally, and maintain a positive working relationship while ensuring the job met expectations. And I could tell from my coworker's reaction that she appreciated me using some emotional self-perception there and self-control. And then here are references.
All right, well, thank you all for listening to our presentation. Hopefully this could be helpful to some of you in the future.